Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the pods.
Total pleasure.
For people watching or listening who don't know who you are, can you please tell people who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name's Andrew Davies. I serve Paddle as their Chief Marketing Officer, have done for 3.5 years. And Paddle is a complete payments infrastructure for digital products companies. So if you're looking to scale a self-serve digital product, whether it's a SaaS, AI, or app, selling around the world is really complicated. And Paddle just makes it simple. It's called a merchant of record. It's the model we use, which means you basically offshore, outsource all of the complexity and cost of dealing with regulations and privacy laws and currency and price points and sales tax around the world, so you can focus on your product and your customer.
Sounds very complex. And how are things going at Paddle?
Because we're a take rate model, we charge a percentage of the money that flows through our platform, about $1.4 billion last year. If the industry slows, our growth slows. And if the industry grows faster, our growth grows faster. We're fully aligned with the growth of the customers that we serve. And clearly, software's had some bumpy times over the last few years. And we experienced that in our base of business, which didn't grow as fast as in prior cohorts in the heyday of 2019 and 2020 and 2021, where money was free and people were growing fast through COVID and with high capitalization. And 2024 was really pivotal for us because we built some really robust foundations to the business. We came to market with a completely rebuilt core product. And we had some leadership changes. Jimmy, who's now our CEO, took over from Christian, who was our founder, who'd been leading the business since it was formed. Went through a huge number of changes, but alongside all those changes, our financial performance was absolutely superb. We beat our goals, and it means that we're going into 2025 really confident of our ability to keep investing to help the 5,000 different digital product companies we serve grow faster. And so we're really on the front foot, but it means there's pressure to go fast.
New opportunity, new waves, new segments. How are you and how's Paddle doing with all of this change?
Thriving, but thriving does not often feel good in a business like this.
Yeah.
It feels like you're holding on with your fingernails. It feels like often things are getting away from you. It feels like there are lots of projects on the go and you don't really know all of them at any one time. It feels like we've always got more to learn than we already know. And so in every one of those segments, all of those things are true. But it also feels good because the businesses that we're winning and then bringing live, they are growing and they are extremely complementary of the way we have worked with them and the way we've helped their business. And that's one thing that's really been true, I guess, in the last couple of years since we replatformed. And since we got much more focused on the markets we serve, the resonance we're finding with those founders, I think, is the biggest payoff. Beyond the fact that we're helping them grow and therefore taking a portion of their business as a fee, like these businesses are genuinely pumped that there's a whole bunch of stuff that they don't have to deal with anymore.
Well, so for you, Andrew, I imagine this is coming up with certain marketing challenges for you. How's that working with the team? What problems have come up for you and the marketing team personally? How are you adapting? How are you changing? What moves are you making?
A year and a half ago, we started splitting our go-to-market by region. And so we built an Americas and a rest of world and international go-to-market. We felt that there was some differences about how they behave, but also there's probably more things that are similar to how they behave, but also they love to engage face-to-face in both markets. And so having people who could get to know the big accounts, the big customers, the big prospects in each region was going to be helpful. And so we already started changing how we went to market through that method. Secondly, one thing that's uniquely true about a consumption model or a usage-based model like Paddle, and this is true of Snowflake and others as well, we don't have any teeth in our contract. Because you can sign a Paddle contract tomorrow, but if you don't choose to put any volume through us, we don't make any money. And you can walk away at any point in time. Okay. There's no teeth. And so as a result of that, we had a phenomenon that Rob, our president, very eloquently called green lights and red faces, where some of our brand indicators and demand gen indicators and opportunity indicators and sales bookings indicators were all green. But it wasn't the right type of business. We didn't deeply understand who we could win and make successful. Therefore, not much of it was going live. And the customer wasn't being successful, and therefore we weren't, because we were a take-rate model. We charge 5% of 50 cents. And so we changed our comp structures. We changed how we aligned those teams across the value chain. So that was another big change. And now if we get to where we are now, we're honestly changing quite a few things again for the purpose of making sure we can speak distinctly to these three target markets, but also up-level our message for the wider market to understand this category, this method that is called merchant of record. It's an old model, but it's not something that's particularly sexy. People haven't, much of the market doesn't know about it, therefore don't know it's a choice. And so one of the things we're doing right now is, because we've been good at speaking to lots of technical buyers through lots of different touch points, we now have a job to make things much more consistent at a higher level, simpler message that can cut through and now build that brand demand engine. So that's now something we're working on.
Was there something that wasn't working with the marketing before? You've obviously made changes because you're targeting new people, but was there a point where it stuttered or stalled before all these changes took place?
There's always loads of stuff that's not working with every function, right? And marketing will be the leading one of those. Part of what we need to do is experiment. So 100%, cards on the table. Any marketer who says everything they're doing is working is probably smoking something or has a 30-foot wave sitting behind them that they're just riding, right?
Yeah.
And so there was lots of stuff that was working. But yeah, there were a bunch of things that we were trying to break through the next ceiling with, and we couldn't break through it. Because I see, the kind of growth in go-to-market as you grow a business as the process of breaking through new ceilings. And so you try one tactic, maybe in the beginning it's founder-led sales, right? And then you get to a limit where you can't do any more. Physically, you've not got any more hours in the day. You don't have any more contacts in your address book. You can't go to any more champagne dinner parties, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You hit the ceiling, you have to try something else. And part of the job in go-to-market is to constantly foresee what that next ceiling looks like and when it's going to start capping you and breaking through it. And sometimes we're late on those and sometimes we're early on those. Being early can be as bad as being too late.
Yeah.
If we're wasting loads of capital investing in something that's not needed yet or not efficient yet. And so when I think about the things that weren't working, they were mostly things that worked up to a ceiling and then could not take us any further.
I found it very interesting when you said you're sometimes too early to something. Is there any that come to your mind there as well? Anything for people in the industry to maybe mentally prepare for themselves, or a bit of advice for people who are just constantly bashing their head against ceilings and they can't figure out a way out?
You can be early, that's a failure mode. You can be wrong, that's a failure mode. You can be late, that's a failure mode. So I'll give an example of the first two. I'll try and think of one for the third one. Let's start with wrong. We had a thesis in the business that we could support B2B SaaS upmarket. So rather than the traditional business we do, which is people who are selling digital products at a $100 a month price point, maybe a $1,000 a month price point, maybe a $10 a month price point, it can go on a card or similar, Apple Pay, Google Pay, etc.
Yeah.
We could go upmarket and process $10,000 a month license fees for enterprise software. And the business problem we solve would largely stay true. We were wrong. Because actually the complexity of growing a software company where you've only got 100 customers that you're invoicing 100 grand a year to is much less. You can deal with that with a small tax team. The transaction volume is much lower. Fraud rates are much lower. Like all the things we solve are just much less problem. The sales tax in a business environment is different.
Yeah.
And so we had this thesis that most of SaaS is upmarket B2B SaaS. That's where everyone's going. We have to go and build a solution for it. What we found is that actually we were wrong. We were much better to stay where we are now and build out the best of breed, future-proof, modern merchant of record for the market we currently serve, the price point we currently serve. So that's a wrong.
Well, so how did you find out you were wrong? By then going to these customers and then being like, we're not interested.
Yep.
Okay, so you built it and then found out after.
And we still have an invoicing product. We process invoices for many people, but it's often will be a smaller part of their volume because there'll be prosumer businesses where you can buy an individual plan for $100 a month on a credit card, and then you upgrade to a team plan that's maybe $2,000 a month, and they might process that via an invoice rather than by checkout. So we found it by lots of conversations. And if we talk again about this value chain, lots of businesses that we actually got good bookings from, we sold to them, and they never went live. Or they went live with a small portion of their volume.
Yeah.
And so what we thought was big deals became very small deals in actuality, green lights, red faces. And that taught us that we didn't have great product market fit here. And we could go and build more to get great product market fit here. But then that's the strategy question. Strategy is saying no to some stuff in order to do other things. Yeah. So that's an example of being wrong, right? And there were a lot of people on that project, including me, thought we had a way of doing it, and we just didn't. Maybe later, but not now. An example of being early, I think, would be this app shift. Christian, our founder, absolutely brilliant, and he called it extremely early that there was going to be this destabilization of the traditional app stores. There was likely to be litigation against Apple and Google in the EU and in the US. We've seen that play out.
Yeah.
Epic Games versus Apple suit, etc., which in fact he testified in San Francisco as a witness around it's possible to build an independent payments infrastructure business. And that was something that we saw very early. We put a Tiger team on very early. We got a wait list up. We had 1,000 or 2,000 app companies saying, if you built something here and we're allowed to do it, we want to do it. And then it sat for probably 18 months because it was just too early. Now, fortunately, the amount of time we put into it meant that being early didn't, slow us down, because then we could just leave that list and come back to it 18 months later. And suddenly, actually, nothing happened in our go-to-market that changed. We didn't go back to try and win them. They came to us, and we would see in our inbound app companies show up saying, things have changed now. I'm able to do this, or I want to do this. There's benefit for me to do this. Can you help me with my web store for my app? Yeah. And so that's an example of being early, but fortunately not being faithful. And then late, we've probably all got examples of businesses that have just been late to a new market shift. The obvious kind of Blockbuster into Netflix would be a great example. But yeah, late, early, or wrong are three values.
Say people are consistently trying to solve their marketing problems and they keep being wrong, late, early. Is there anything they can do, introduce into the business, or a skill they can learn to, obviously you'll never avoid them entirely, but is there a way to get better at it, or is it totally trial and error?
Maybe it's a bit of trial and error. This is basically good listening and good analysis, right? It's speaking to people in the market, understanding if they're nodding when you're offering them something, if they agree the problem that you think you're solving, if they can play it back to you in their own words, if you're understanding what they're saying, if there's clarity over that, and whether your product can solve that problem. So this becomes extremely difficult and extremely painful, particularly in leaders of businesses that have got cash running out and are desperate to try and find that next wave. And I ran one of those businesses. The business we built, IDEO, it was a solution in search of a problem for years. We'd find a fit with a certain segment, and then they'd churn. We'd find a fit with another segment, then we'd realize they couldn't pay very much. We'd find a fit with it. And we went through a period, probably 4 years, of iterating, not so much on the product, although the product kept getting better, iterating on the market it served. And it was incredibly influential for me how we kind of got out of that. Ed, my co-founder and the CEO of that business, I can remember we took the whole leadership team away. We went through the Crossing the Chasm book by Jeffrey Moore.
Okay.
So moving from trial and error to some framework, go and read that book. And it's an overly military metaphor. It talks about market entry, so not necessarily in geographic market entry, but the segments you go after, the early innovators, and then you go through and you eventually get to the laggards. And any software product, anything innovative, you've got to isolate who are the people who can buy right now and find the smallest definition of that market so you can go and win as much of them as possible before you bridge into larger definitions of your market. And so we used his framework, we used his book, our whole leadership team read his book.
Yeah.
And then we went through our entire customer stack and we basically decided to focus on one segment at the expense of everything else. And I've never seen a business where focus on a smaller segment doesn't pay off in better win rates, in better value, in better enterprise value, but also in better understanding of that market that then bridges you into future segments. I'd much rather have the consistently difficult conversation of we've got too small a target market than the much easier conversation that can be much more painful in the long run, which is actually we think we've got $1 billion market, but we don't really know any of them or what their problems are.
When we were doing our pre-call, you mentioned if you want to grow your market and your segments, it's got to be a conscious decision, because a lot of the wisdom that's thrown around business these days, it's the riches and the niches. People are like, you have to niche down, and then once you've kind of mastered that, expansion, the larger market starts coming to you because they hear you solve the problem and all that. But you found from your experience more often than not, it's going to be a conscious decision to start pulling in, for example, what you're doing right now, those bigger businesses, decisions you're making to go after them and change your message.
I think one of the most important functions in kind of the strategy and ops part of a business like ours, and for many years previously as well, is an understanding of the TAM, the total addressable market, and then inside that, the SAM, the serviceable addressable market, and inside that, the SOM, the serviceable obtainable market. So TAM, total addressable market, is everybody you can possibly sell to. And you can size that number of customers. Maybe there's 50,000 businesses we can sell to, and they'll all pay us $1,000 a year. So there you go. You've got your total addressable market in dollar value. Now, actually, the SAM, the serviceable addressable market, is who, with our current product, with our current capabilities, do we have resonance with? And that'll be a much smaller number, and it should be a much smaller number. And then you have the SOM, the serviceable obtainable market, which is really within our current resources, team, budget, etc., geographic coverage. Who can we go and win? And one of the rules of thumb in that Geoffrey Moore book is that your beachhead, your first SOM, if you like, your serviceable obtainable market, should be so small, should be uncomfortably small, that you should be able to win 50% of it or more within the next 18 months. And I think that's a really good rule of thumb because it forces you to think really narrow. Because that phrase, and I remember I was studying in America on exchange for a year, and my marketing lecturer came out with the pronouncing the word niche. It was the first time I've ever heard an American butcher that wonderful French word. The riches are in the niches. But yeah, actually they are in the niches, but they have to be the right niche. We've got to really deeply understand not just that niche, but for the purpose of, to your point, then growing a business over time, what is the next one and the next one and the next one? So this TAM, SAM, and SOM is not a static process. It changes. It changes with the market, but it changes with your product as well, because you actually have to know today's SOM, but also tomorrow's SOM and the day after's SOM, and at least have a thesis on, because you've got better budget or better team, but also because you've got better product and better customer understanding, where you go next.
Also, it's good because it's nice. I speak to a lot of marketing directors or heads of marketing, and a lot of businesses still view marketing as just an advertising promotional arm, like a nice to have or a necessary evil. Whereas it sounds like within Paddle, they understand the strategic purpose of marketing. How big a part do you think that plays in the success of the business?
Christian was the CEO when I joined, our founder, and absolutely deeply believes in and understands the value of us building awareness and affinity in the market that precedes any business that we actually do there. Jimmy, the CEO now, who came in as COO and then was promoted up to CEO as Christian took a step back, again, deeply understands that enterprise value. We've got to build this awareness and understanding. He came from ServiceNow, where he was for years and years, one of the biggest tech brands in the space. Again, different go-to-market and different target market, but a really strong household name brand within their community. So I think it has been important. And again, it differs in these different segments. Down market is really important that we are there and we're responsive and we build community and we've got strong documentation. We've got technical people talking to technical people. It all makes sense, right? But I do think part of our unlock now is this being able to make this model famous, talk about the category we're in, because right now the category awareness is probably more important to us than Paddle's awareness.
Okay.
We get lots of good creds and responses on people loving our brand and loving how we show up and our people. And if we think about brand, right, it's not a marketing thing. Like, I strongly believe that one of the biggest levers to up our brand is product and engineering investment. The work that the developer experience team under Kieran did to totally revamp our dev documentation was one of the biggest things for our particularly startup and SMB brand awareness and brand reputation we've ever done.
Okay.
Yes, it looked nice, but it wasn't a campaign. It was us documenting with rigor and giving really clear guidance on how to implement and what the. So yeah, I just think it has many components. But to answer your question, I think it's been fundamental to our journey and will continue to be.
Well, I really liked what you said. I actually did a LinkedIn post about it today. Whenever I come down to London, it's fairly intense. I'll go from one meeting to the other, cover 20, 25 different steps, whatever, because I agree with the importance of face-to-face in a world where everyone's trying to do everything from behind the desk. Going on just how the relationships you build face-to-face, you can't replicate that any other way.
In the businesses I've been part of, the company we served, the company we founded, a couple of companies before that we founded that didn't work out, and in the business that acquired us and in many of the advisory roles I've been part of, I've been quite external facing. when I joined Paddle, one of the things I believed strongly about the business I was joining was there was a lot more goodness inside of it that was not being reflected outside of it. And again, part of that's design choices and clunkiness of look and feel and message, but a lot of that is just the people. When we show up, people love paddlers. They're humble, they're hungry, they love to learn, they're helpful. And so I deeply believed that we had to be out there much more. And I was very happy to go and kind of plow that myself and then let other people follow that. And now we've got multiple people to go and speak at different events, etc. So it was very intentional. It wasn't just Andrew likes doing this stuff, therefore we should do it. It was very intentional with a purpose. And you asked about kind of making the case for it. I think many founders, many businesses, as you're trying to scale, you're desperate for things that are automated and scalable. You read some books around it, and you want something where you can press a button, or you can do some SEO articles, or whatever you can do, press go on an AI outbound engine, and it just happens in front of you.
Systematize everything.
Systematize everything, exactly. Again, maybe I'm just not smart enough to do that. I deeply believe that in a conversation together, we get much further faster. I understand your world much more. And honestly, if you're telling me that what I'm saying is totally wrong, in a face-to-face environment, we get that signal in a much higher fidelity way than if you just churn off a free plan you tried.
Yeah.
And so it's a much more resonant signal of input on whether what we're doing is working or not, if we're sharing roadmap, if we're talking about our future, etc. So I deeply believe in it. I also believe that across the marketing mix, if you've got the right target customers identified, almost everything works. And if you don't, almost nothing works. And so events, meeting face-to-face, doing dinner series, doing road shows, it all comes down to, do you know your audience? Do you have an intimate awareness of who is, that SOM, that serviceable addressable market, and can you get them with a message that matters to turn up and chat to you? And so often I think event spend gets a bad rap, particularly big trade show events where you're just doing clicks on lead scans and then it goes into an email sequence and people get followed up. And there's nothing particularly human about that process. Yeah. It's exhausting. I'd much rather do what we're both doing this evening and going for dinner with 40 founders of app businesses and heads of growth from app businesses and having a detailed conversation with them where they actually, a lot of the benefit in the room isn't from the people who are hosting the dinner. It's them learning from peers. Yeah. That's what a lot of them want. They want to learn from someone like them. And so a couple of pointers on how you should do that. I deeply believe that that's a key one. You should make sure you put people in the room who want to learn off each other and then get out of the way. You're connecting people rather than talking to people. Number two, it doesn't have to be some crazy private dining room. It just needs to be a space where there's that humility and the ability for those peer connections to happen. Content sometimes is helpful, a bit of a show and tell at the beginning to set the context, but often it isn't. Yeah. And then thirdly, just understanding in your marketing mix that it isn't a close event. Like some people just use these dinners as a way to go and get some late stage customers across the line. And there's good reasons to build trust in their sales cycle through that. Yeah. But actually this is relationship starting in many cases. It's networking, it's finding someone who actually has got a friend who's in market who might want to join you at some point. There's a whole range of other things that I think you have to struggle to quantify in the near term, but it plays out over time.
Yeah. So we've spoken about a few marketing tactics that you do. The B2B space, everyone's talking about storytelling and how B2B is going through a renaissance and it's exciting. And how do you feel about the current state of B2B marketing? What problems are you seeing? What things aren't you liking?
I'm not someone who's super critical, and so I don't not like lots of things. I do not like boring. I think there's lots of B2B marketing is boring. If we're going to go and think about this world that, as you say, the storytelling renaissance, again, a lot of it just comes down to the basics. If you go back to the old Ogilvy books, if you go back to the core principles of marketing and advertising, there's nothing new under the sun. This is, again, do we deeply understand our customer? Because yes, being playful and jokey in marketing more people might be using it. But if that's not your target market, if that doesn't resonate with who you're selling and doesn't align with your proposition, it's the wrong thing to do. So people shouldn't chase fads here. I think the key principle for me is that being deeply thoughtful about this and then really ambitious is how you get out of the really competitive area where everyone's doing the same thing. So it's not being different for the sake of being different. It's being different for the sake of cutting through in a way that's highly resonant based on insight you have about your customers. And so if you can do that, then that's really interesting because it's rare air. It's much less competitive to be very bold around an idea than it is to do yet another ebook.
So you've done some quite bold campaigns here at Paddle. Any favorite ones come to mind?
Going to space was fun. Documentary was fun. Some of our big events have been really fun, where we've not just done the event at the trade show, but 7 or 8 pop-up events around it. We've got some more coming up over the next 3 months you should watch out for. We even built a custom 3D printed just do it button. One of our kind of product principles at that point was that we do it for you. And so we had this button we sent to people, and they could press it and we'd do something for them as a live activation.
Nice. Yeah.
So we played around with lots of stuff. Some of it works, some of it doesn't work. But also I do believe that you can be known, and we have become known for being creative in how we do those things. And I think that's memorable in its own right.
The whole key to all of this is speaking to your customer. When it comes to those big, bold campaigns for standing out, you mentioned yourself, branding is people's whole experience of the company. When it comes to those big, creative, standout things, what is the value in them for you and the team beyond being creative? Obviously, people were talking about the payment in space, but where do you see it in the marketing mix and goals?
All the studies that you read show that if you can increase brand awareness and affinity, it plays out in better conversion rate over time. So my core thesis, it's not rocket science, is that you either invest in brand or you pay the price in customer acquisition cost every quarter from now until you exit. So there's a very clear financial basis for this. It's not doing it for fun. It's if we can build brand affinity in the target markets we serve, it'll mean more people come inbound without us having to go outbound. There'll be those who we outbound to will know more about us. Everyone will be better in terms of their relationship with what we do and their definition around what we do and the problems we solve. And they'll close faster and they'll grow faster. So it's a really simple set of maths behind it. Lots of studies have shown that. The key, though, is it often takes multiple quarters to ever show a difference. Some of the studies I've seen in the B2B context in the UK have been 4 quarters of very big top line brand investments before it ever comes through in it ever comes through in customer in acquisition cost dropping. So you've got to know that and be willing to invest for that kind of long term before you see anything in the numbers.
We could get into real marketing rabbit hole of the long and the short, but the power of brand building, I agree 100%. But it's that long term, 3, 4, 5 years potentially. But from those big awareness campaigns, has there been any that have surprised you and the team that you've seen almost an immediate ROI or an immediate increase in people reaching out?
Sometimes, but rarely. I think when it does, it's because you do this and expect a demand result as well as a brand result. So take that space campaign. So we sent a device to space, processed a payment through our checkout, and filmed it with 4K video cameras above the Earth's atmosphere. That was also an ABM process where we'd sent some swag up in the payload and sent that swag, there were jumpers that we attached these badges to 200 top accounts, and that opened up a bunch of extra pipeline for us. And so I do think the challenge often with these things is for your business case internally to make sure you've got a brand goal as well as a demand goal as well as a brand goal. And you can have demand gen campaigns that you just execute really well so they have a brand impact, and vice versa.
You mentioned obviously that you ran your own business and started your own business. Something that's very obvious from speaking to you is that entrepreneurial mindset, being creative, thinking what's next, and the problem solving you're always thinking of. How do you feel that experience from running your own business has played into who you are now as a marketer and someone in a business?
I guess I'm not too philosophical about it. It's just the journey I'm on, and we'll see where the next step takes me. I do think that marketers often don't think about enterprise value. They think about MQLs, and they don't think about the value chain in the industry they serve. They think about the next program they're running. And so having a step back mindset, so having had to deal with investors and raise capital in good circumstances and bad, having had to have a detailed understanding of multiple segments and how we can go bet the house on one versus the other, having to hire people and let people go, having to go through market expansion into different territories and build offices, all that stuff, it just gives you background context. And in my current role, selling to founders, it gives me real sympathy and empathy with the people that we're serving. But I think the biggest thing is a frame of reference that's outside of marketing.
So how can marketers, like some marketers who are listening to this and they're like, I'm trying to get more involved, I want to get more involved, where can they start?
Yeah, I think if you're selling to startups, go and read all the startup literature. Go listen to the podcasts on startup. Go and listen to the podcasts. Go and read the stuff that the people you're serving are consuming. I think one of the changes that's happening in marketing if I was designing a marketing function from the ground up right now, I would have subject matter experts who have either been in the target persona's job or have, who deeply understand it because they've been a consultant or similar in that world, or they're a product marketer who's going to get into that world and deeply understand it. I think one of the challenges in many segments is we have professional marketers selling to ICPs they've never been. So, with the rise of influencers and micro influencers, with the talent shakeup that's happening, I think there's a big opportunity for people to bring into their marketing functions people who look like their target market. And I think that's really cool.
We've spoken a lot about the conversations with customers and going out and speaking to them. Has there ever been a golden nugget, like a serious moment of insight that a customer said something and you're like, how did we not think about it? How did we not realize that? And how did that conversation come about? Was it from your efforts going out and speaking to people? Or
Loads.
Yeah,
like most weeks. And some of those are more seismic. Give you an example of one that was seismic recently. Speaking to one of our customers that's reasonably small. I don't know how much they process through ad checkout. I don't know. They might be a $1 million a year software business. So they're a business, but they're not massive in the grand scheme of things. But it's deeply important to that person. They are on what we call Paddle Classic, the previous version of our product, and we're now working with people to migrate across to Paddle Billing, which is our brand new, built from scratch, great developer experience, loads more capabilities product. They didn't even know we launched Paddle Billing a year and a half ago. We thought we told all our customers. We thought we told the world. This customer, very happy customer of Paddle, never knew that we had updated everything. We'd spent 100 engineers for 18 months building this new thing. That's a real great bit of insight. And now we need to go back into our customer marketing and work out how we have a better communication. So yeah, lots of things like that.
What is one big trend taking place in marketing right now you think people are missing as an opportunity?
I think there's lots of big trends. We talk about AI, we talk about influencer marketing, we talk about subject matter expertise, building founder brands, blah, blah, blah. I'm probably less interested in all of that and much more interested in the stuff that endures. So again, coming back to the things we talked about, do we understand our target market? Do we have a message that matters for them? Do we have strong product market fit to make raving fans in that segment? The stuff that changes, you can jump on bandwagons, you can make the most of it. But it's those things that endure. I think most people should be focusing most of the time.
So do you think there's something going down in marketing right now that a lot of people are getting distracted by the classic shiny ball syndrome?
Yes. So if we take AI-driven outbound as a great trend that's happening right now, that enables you to talk to much larger audiences at a much lower cost. But it probably means pissing off an extra million people you didn't have to piss off.
Terrible customer experience. Well, one last question to wrap this up before we head to our nice dinner. What, if you could go back and tell your younger self something, let's say 10 years ago, what would be a key piece of advice you'd give them?
I would probably ask myself to risk more. I've risked quite a lot, but risk more and swing harder. Most of the good things in my life have come from saying yes to things that were uncertain, and running hard at them, swinging harder at them probably would have dealt bigger outcomes.
Is there any big risks you can think of that you didn't take that really plays on you?
It's more about coming to that point of conviction where you go harder with the risk you're taking. So, some of the key inflection points in my life, like the one we talked about with that market segment problem at IDEO. It was then when we bet the house on the one segment that we then grew a repeatable business and were able to exit it successfully. And so it's probably coming to those decisions earlier and then doing more with the resources at our hand to go harder on that and faster at that is really what my reflection would be.
Andrew, for anyone listening or watching who wants to follow along your journey, see what Paddle's up to, where can they find you?
Grab me on LinkedIn. It's normally where I hang out. I'm also on Twitter, but very irregularly, or come to one of our dinners or events. We'd love to meet you face to face.
Perfect. Thanks for coming on, Andrew.